The U.S. nukes North Korea, and Japan decides to dump Prime Minister Abe. Last week, the U.S. Air Force dropped a nuclear weapon on a mountaintop close to North Korea's nuclear test site as a warning to that country to stop its recent missile provocations, according to NSA sources. It was reported in the world's media merely as U.S. bombers flying the furthest north of the demilitarized zone in the 21st century. This flight was followed by reports of a magnitude 3.5 earthquake close to where North Korea recently tested a hydrogen bomb. Contradictory media reports describe this earthquake as either natural or the result of a nuclear explosion. In any case, North Korea did not brag about a nuclear test after this event. U.S. President Donald Trump appeared to be hitting at this attack with the following tweets. I told Rex Tillerson, a wonderful Secretary of State, that he's wasting his time trying to negotiate with little rocket man. Save your energy, Rex. We'll do what has to be done. Being nice to rocket men hasn't worked in 25 years. Why would it work now? Clinton failed, Bush failed, and Obama failed. I won't fail. The nuclear attack on North Korea was followed by a decision by Asian secret societies, in coordination with Khazarian mafioso Henry Kissinger, to dump Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, say Asian secret society sources. That is why Abe called a general election on October 22nd, the sources say. Japan's next designated Prime Minister, Tokyo Governor Yukiko Koike, will be Japan's first female Prime Minister, they add. The Japanese corporate propaganda media is now preparing the way for an upset victory by Koike's new party, with enhanced coverage of the Abe scandals and glowing coverage of Koike. Also, all the opposition's parties, following orders, suddenly and unanimously decide to back Koike. Koike also is backed by veteran Japanese politician Ichiro Ozawa, who is both widely seen as a North Korean agent and a Rockefeller stooge. Rockefeller-backed man Henry Kissinger is actively all of his vassals in Japan like Ozawa to make sure Koike replaces the unpopular Abe, several sources concur. There's also a Saudi Arabian and Korean connection to this campaign, in the form of anti-Korean businessman Masayoshi Son. Son now owns the Fortress Investment Group, which in turn owns Musashi Engineering, the company that makes the machines that stole Japan's elections. Remember, it was Son who recently was given $100 billion by Saudi Arabia and then offered $50 billion of it to Donald Trump. Koike speaks fluent Arabic and is widely known in Japan as being friendly to the Middle East, especially its oil-producing countries. It is probably no coincidence that Koike is saying she's opposed to nuclear energy, since shutting down Japan's nuclear power generations means Japan will have to buy more oil from Saudi Arabia to keep its power grid going. Koike is also pledging to strengthen Japan's military alliance with the U.S. She is doing this because the entire Japanese slave establishment is worried about who is going to replace Admiral Harry Harris as the top U.S. military commander in the Pacific. It was supposed to be Admiral Scott Swift, but he suddenly announced his retirement last week after being told he would not take over from Harris. The slave political establishment in Japan is terrified that the next top commander will follow the recommendations of Japan's security police and arrest 700 Khazarian slaves just as the former prime ministers and former Bank of Japan governors. Whether or not the arrests take place will depend on what Koike does, assuming that she takes power as promised. In particular, she and the public politicians' establishment must stop trying to start World War III for the Rothschild bosses. Instead, they will be asked to make peace and reach a deal to reunify the Korean peninsula, say the CIA sources in Asia. With Bannon as shadow president outside the White House and flipping Kissinger to contain China, the nationalists are poised to defeat the globalists and establishment lackeys. It's what Pentagon sources cryptically say about the situation. The other establishment lackey other than Abe, who is said to have been given marching orders, is UK Prime Minister Theresa May, according to CIA sources. May is said to be replaced by UK Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn, the sources say. A deal has been made at the very top to allow Corbyn to proceed. If not, his people would have released the true story of Grenfell Towers, the sources say. Over 400 died in the deliberate blast, which was meant as a sacrifice to the satanic entity Molech, the sources explained. Khazarian mob stronghold of Israel has also been smashed down, as the U.S. refuses to recognize the illegal Kurd referendum, Pentagon sources say. Furthermore, Russia and China forced Interpol to accept Palestine so that Israeli criminals and Mossad terrorists can be arrested worldwide, they add. The Khazarians are also facing multiple defeats in the former U.S. stronghold. In Hollywood, police are investigating the death of Playboy founder Hugh Hefner as murder because he was working out a plea deal to expose pedophilia, torture, human sacrifice, and other horrors carried out by Hollywood elite. Also, in the southern U.S., Kabul Pond, Alabama Senator Luther Strand, backed by McConnell and the GOP machine, was defeated by Christian conservative Judge Roy Moore, backed by Bannon and the Trump bases, the Pentagon sources say. Trump was lukewarm about Luther and may have no choice but to fire son-in-law Jared Kushner for pushing him to back the wrong horse, using private emails, registering to vote as a female, and lying on his security clearance and financial disclosures, not to mention acting as an agent of Israel, they add. Already Kushner's access to Trump is being restricted by White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly. Furthermore, with a military junta running the White House, top U.S. General Jose Dunford was approved unanimously by the Senate for a second two-year term as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Pentagon sources note. A Khazarian attempt to use National Football League to counterattack against the military by ordering players not to stand where the national anthem was playing also failed badly. This was how a Pentagon sources described the situation. The NFL, weaponized by Jewish Hollywood to wage war against not just the flag but the U.S. military, is now under boycott by patriots, not just against the league and teams, but also against corporate sponsors like Nike, Ford, Pepsi, Visa, FedEx, Hyundai, Bush, Microsoft, Dana, McDonald's, and Procter & Gamble. The result was that after Trump rallied his nationalist base, who quickly ruined the Jewish Mafia NFL Black protest, the Jewish-run National Basketball Association got the message and ordered their mostly black players to stand for the national anthems, the sources continue. In another defeat for the Khazarians and the drug lords, U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency Chief Chuck Rosenberg, a protege of disgraced former FBI boss James Courtney, was fired after the U.S. military killed his plans to merge the DEA with FBI, they say. The Khazarian campaign to use a geoengineered storm on Puerto Rico to disgrace the Trump regime has also failed badly. The Khazarians carry out a heavy campaign using fake Twitter accounts and propaganda media to portray the Puerto Rico as a disaster and Trump as a racist for not helping. The reality is that the U.S. military did provide all the necessary logistics to get Puerto Rico back on its feet in very short order. The only remaining problem is that Khazarians are using their control for the financial system to shut down ATMs on the island. If you look at pictures of relatively minor damage in Puerto Rico on Spanish-language media outlets, you can say that English-language corrupted media coverage is mostly false. What is really going on, of course, is that Puerto Rico has not been paying off its bondholders so that it was cut off from the Khazarian banking system. The U.S. military stepped in with logistic and cash money to rectify the situation. However, the U.S. military junta, using Trump as a figurehead, still does not have full control over this president, especially when it comes to economic situation. That is why Trump was able to unveil a tax plan last week that overwhelmingly favored the richest 1% of U.S. society. There is something weird going on with Trump's relation with Canada and the UK. Last week, UK's Prince Harry displays an unmistakable satanic hand sign for a long time, while posing for a media with Melania Trump in Canada. CIA sources say this was a sign by Prince Harry that the Melania Trump he met was not the real Melania, but was a body double. MI5 sources say he was pointing out Melania as a Satanist. For the case, Trump followed up on Melania's visit by imposing a 220% tariff on imports of Canadian passenger planes, the knocking of North Korea, the trouble in Puerto Rico, and the de facto declaration of trade war with number one U.S. trade partner Canada are all probably bluster. It's linked to the fact that the corporate government Trump represents went de facto bankrupt on September 30th and is now living on borrowed time.